Hello and welcome back to the YouTube channel of Bethel Evangelical Free Church Hanley. I'm Pastor Gervais Chalmley. This is another video in the series on Derbyshire churches. This is the church of St Michael and All Angels, Alsop on the Dale in the Peak District. As the name suggests, it is located in a picturesque valley just off the main road between Ashbourne and Buxton. But you wouldn't know it. It's down a hill, down in the valley. It's a small church. It's a good representation, actually, of what the really old Peak District churches would have been like. Now, of course, the Victorians have been at it. Of course they have. It's very rare to find a building they haven't been at. And what that means is that some of the original elements have disappeared. Originally, the walls would have been plastered. The Victorians had this strange idea that medieval church, or many of them had the strange idea medieval churches should have bare stone on the inside. No, they shouldn't. I mean, look at the quality of this stonework. This is not fine ashlar stone. This is cheap rubble that would have been plastered, and then in the 12th century, when it's first built, it would have been plastered and painted just with lines to imitate stonework. But the Victorians, no, we want not just bare stone, which makes it all seem rather grim. And it's one of the reasons I think why people misunderstand what the Middle Ages were like very often, is what we see ruined castles, well obviously they're ruins, and we see churches the Victorians have been at like this. And again, what it means is that the colour that would have been notable in the Middle Ages has largely gone. Yes, we've got nice patterned wall, or patterned tiles on the floor, but you don't look at the floor. So this is basically it's a 12th century building with alterations. We'll have a look around and see what we can see. So we'll start as usual at the west end. You can see here the Chancel Arch. Now the arch itself is pointed, it's 14th century, but the piers at the bottom don't really seem to match, do they? And that's because they are the original 12th century piers. The chancel has been rebuilt in the 12th century and then again quite largely rebuilt in the late 19th, early 20th century. There's no furnishings here to speak of earlier than the 19th century, and even the wall memorials, the eldest in the 19th century, and there's just two big ones to members of the Beresford family. It's quite interesting, and you'll see why when we look at them. We have not a lot of original windows. I think there's one original window. These are not original. These are ones of the north wall. These are, again, early 20th century. A little bit of patterned glass in them. They're imitation Norman. But the Normans had very few windows because a church like this, your windows are basically open to the elements, so the snow and the rain and the wind can get through unless they're shuttered. So they have to be small windows. They're to let a bit of light in, that's all. This is possibly one of the originals, square window, but deeply splayed internally. The font, although it imitates the 19th century, the 12th century, is actually 19th century. And the seating is again 19th century benches. You will notice the whacking great pulpit. I'll say a bit more about that when we get to it. So we move forward and we come to the memorials. They're to members of the Beresford family. First of all, Francis Beresford of Castern, in the parish of Ilam and county of Stafford. Now, we're here very near the border with Staffordshire. And Francis Beresford died on the 15th of January 1801, aged 59 years, which is quite young for those. It's particularly somebody clearly, well, as Beresford, the Beresfords were a very notable family here. There's actually a Beresford Dale where they used to have a big house. And you can see just from this, the quality of the memorial, how notable he would have been. And also Anne, his wife, who died the 5th of June 1830, aged 85, so she lived a pretty good life, particularly those days. But next to them is their son, Anthony Beresford of Alstonfield in the county of Stafford, son of Francis and Anne Beresford of Castern, who died March the 3rd, 1874, aged 102 years. also in memory of Thomasine Beresford, daughter of the above-named Francis and Anne Beresford, who died January the 31st, 1847, aged 64 years. That's his sister. I mean, 102. That's a good old age even today. So he's born in the 1770s, born 1772, and he dies 1874. How much changed in his lifetime? We have here what is certainly an original window. You can see the carved top there, and this not very big, and there would have been shutters to close it in bad weather. Now the church has been quite significantly restored. It's had a tower added. This is a photograph of St Michael's before the restoration. You see all the ivy growing over it. You also see the roof line is that typical 15th century shallow pitch on the nave. No tower, just a little bell cot. You see there's a lady standing in the doorway, and the chancel with those square-headed windows. So that's what it looked like in the 1890s, and then it's thoroughly restored later 1890s. I suspect that photographs are taken before the restoration. Now this is the pulpit, and it's huge. Why such a big pulpit? Why such a big and fancy pulpit in such a little and simple church? Well, the answer is that the nearby town of Ashbourne was chucking out their old pulpit around the time the restoration happened here, and the folk at Alsop, cost conscious, because you can see these are very, very simple benches. I mean, this is the sort of thing you'd get off the peg from a church furnishings company. This isn't specially made. And so they've got this pulpit going begging in Ashbourne, and the church here says, oh, we're restoring our church. I suspect the previous pulpit would have been a narrow 3-decker. We'd like a new pulpit. There's one going begging. Great, we'll have it. And so the Ashbourne pulpit has come here, and it's a little bit big and fancy for this church, but it's a nice pulpit. Good example of the earlier part of the 19th century, early Gothic revival style. Big square wooden thing. And again into the chancel we've got our off the peg furnishings, off the peg reading desk, altar. You can see the tiled floor. There's a piscina, 14th century piscina here. It's on the wrong side, and I do wonder, has it been moved or was it always here? Could be either, but because this has been restored, I suspect it's been moved when the restoration happened. There is the Millennium window here, which represents the New Jerusalem seen by John in Revelation. We'll take their word for it. These things are often quite, shall we say, figurative. And again, very simple furnishings. These windows, those we can see from the old photograph, that they do represent the way things were. These are clearly, again, early 20th century windows. And again, looking west, Tower Arch, which is early 20th century, and the roof has been altered, again to go with the whole. We want it to look a bit more Norman. So there we are, that's the interior here at St Michael and All Angels, Alsop on Ledale. So before we go outside, we'll just return to the photograph of this is the building as it used to be, and then we can hopefully do a comparison. And so here we go. By the magic of video, we can go from a Victorian photograph to the church as it is today, and you can see the immediate difference is this tower. It's got a tower now. It looks like a typical English, little English church, tower, nave, chancel. And you can also see how The big changes are the tower, and this roof line has been altered to a more Norman pitch. Probably the height between the top of the door and the roof is as it would have been in the 12th century. It's quite normal to find these Norman churches are quite tall buildings. So here we are on the outside. Have a look at the little look down the dale, and also a look around the outside of the church. So here we are outside. Now, to the west of the church and somewhat and across the road is the hall. It's a good example of what's known as the high house style of architecture. You can see why, because you've got that tall central block, and that would have been where the really posh rooms were. That's your show rooms, and you've then got your wings either side. So it's still a private house, so we'll just peer at it here. Manor house, church, generally found close to each other. This can never have been a very populous area. There's no sign here in the Dale where you'd expect it really of any medieval field systems. There's a few trackways, you can just see one coming along there, and then intersecting, and then this trackway it intersects with comes down to a stile which then comes across to the church. And this is the Dale, looking down towards Parwich, and the quiet country churchyard with all these old gravestones. A lot of them are these very typical of the area, these slate stones. So we'll move back towards the church. We have up here the graves of the Wild family of Cold Eaton. You can see one of the local big farmers. To the memory of the late Thomas Wild of Cold Eaton, who died August the 14th, 1880, aged 60, I think it says 3 years, a bit of ivy over it. For none of us liveth to himself, and no man dieth to himself. For whether we live unto the Lord, and whether we die unto the Lord. Whether we live, therefore, or die, we are the Lord's. And then Elizabeth, daughter of Thomas and Elizabeth Wild of Cold Eaton, who departed this life April 25th, 1852, aged 33 years. No murmur was heard, nor the breath of a sigh, for she knew that her Jesus stood watching her die. Pale death o'er her body held mighty control, but nothing could ruffle the peace of her soul. I mean, moving back in time as we go along here, to some extent, in affectionate remembrance of Elizabeth, wife of Thomas Wild of Cold Eaton, who died March the 30th, 1864, aged 83 years. To mourning hearts and weeping eyes springs comfort from the sod. Gathered to all she loved she lies, and gathered to her God. Sacred to the memory of Thomas Wild, who died the 21st of May, 1825, aged 55 years. Go home, dear wife, no more lament, and children, all pray be content. My dearest friends, some pity take, and love my children for my sake. And then we have William Stubbs, who died in 1874. John Garlick, who clearly was some relation, probably a son-in-law. This is obviously the Wild plot. And then Luke Wild, who died in 1853, worn out with weakness and old age, I now must leave this mortal stage. Therefore I can no longer stay, my time is come, I must away. But you'll notice how Elizabeth and Thomas at the end, they very much have, and you have these two generations of Thomases, both of whom married Elizabeths. How the last two, you have this very much Christian piety, and Elizabeth, wife of Thomas. But then you've got these others where it's simply, well, I'm dying and leaving this world. There seems to be an evangelicalism in these slightly later ones that isn't in these others. So there we are, looking across the Dale, and we've got a couple of table tombs here. And this is the great treasure of the church, the great glory of the building, and it is the Norman doorway. Now there's a number of Norman tympanons locally, one at Tissington, there's one at Parwich, and there's another one a bit further away at Hognaston. But here, there's no tympanum, but there is this beautiful carving on the doorway. It's a bit battered, it has been here since the 12th century, what do you expect? But still we can see much of the beauty of the original carving. Here we have this doorway, not doorway, rather the window, and we have a memorial to Ralph Johnson of Parwich, and this is what, 1755 he died, and then you have a number of other members of the families. And just here, and this is an interesting thing to look for, is what's called a mass dial. You see that, you've got your central hull and you've got your markings, a type of sundial, and it would help the priest to work out the times for mass. He'd put a stick in the middle and look at the shadow. It's partially obscured now, but you can still just about see it. Now here we have the chancel, early 20th century rebuilding, but you've still got your big solid stone foundations. Sheep on the hills above, and that's the road, just the one road to the middle of the village. And these rather stunted trees. North side, no windows in the Middle Ages, just got these 3 early 20th century windows, and we've got the tower. You can see the difference in terms of the stonework, and these whacking great foundation stones. Do wonder, was it originally a bit banked up on this side? Have they dug it out slightly? And so we continue around the building. You see, for such a simple building, there's so much of interest here. Things like that mass dial, and of course things like these memorials that tell us something about the beliefs and the lives of the people who lived here in the past. So we're back at the front door. Also there we have it, St Michael and All Angels, Parwich. Parwich is up the road. No, this is Alsop. It's a lovely building much admired and much worthy of admiration. Well, thank you for watching, and may God bless you and keep you till the next time.